That joke isn't funny anymore. Available on Amazon and everywhere. Hey guys, welcome back to the Lou Perez Podcast. I'm your host, Lou Perez, and today I am joined by Robert Steinfeld, who has a new book out. It's called 3, 2, 1, We're on the Air, an inside look at sports, television, journalism, and gender equity. And I got a copy right here, right next to me. So Robert, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me. I mean, we were, before we started rolling, we actually, I asked like, oh, do you like to be called Bob or Robert? And I think you had some good advice right off the bat as far as writers out there when it comes to bylines and which name to use. So if you wanted to repeat that for the audience.
Well, yeah, when I was writing for the Hillcrest Hurricane, the high school newspaper, award-winning high school newspaper, which is another thing that we can talk about. My journalism professor to this day, it was the best teacher I ever had. My first story that I wrote, I had my byline, and I wrote, what my friends call me, Bobby Steinfeld, staff writer. And then my mom saw it, and she said, you really should be professional about it and go with your real name. And so from then on, whenever I wrote for the paper or I wrote for the University of Texas student newspaper, the Daily Texan, and then as a writer for the Dallas Times Herald, and, my credit on the air with producer director, it's always Robert Steinfeld. So, so that's how it came about. Good advice from my mom.
Yeah. I started, I wrote from my high school newspaper. It was the Magnificat, and it was a high school newspaper at St. Mary's High School in Manhasset, Long Island. And I was editor in chief. And I also I guess I had the equivalent of a column. And I had a really great teacher. It's funny, like my English journalism teacher is the best teacher I ever had, Brother Jeff Pedersen. And he used to let me go wild. I could write satire. I could, do all this stuff. And it had, it's funny. You think about like just how big of an impact that one person can have on a kid, especially at that young age, to sort of steer them into a role of either, journalism or, creative journalism.
Yeah. You know what? And my teacher her name was Julia Judy Jeffress, and Mrs. Jeffress. And, once I got to the University of Texas, and I was in Journalism 301, and I was telling all the students already what we were about to learn, because I had already had an equivalent of a sophomore or upper division journalism experience in high school. So I knew we were going to learn the 5 W's and H. I was telling them what they were. And then one thing I put in my book, one advice, this is for anyone that's listening, if you're going to write a lead paragraph, which is the paragraph that opens up a news story or release and everything, go back and read what you wrote. And if you say, so what, at the end of it, then you need to keep writing it until you don't say so what anymore. So it'll lead you on to the next paragraph and the next paragraph and the next paragraph. So that's good advice.
Do you ever look back on stuff that you wrote as a kid, and either with pride of the adult that you are now, yes, the professional, or is there a little bit of cringe there as well?
Well, if you go back, like in the closet behind me is another thing that my journalism teacher in high school taught us to do, is to keep a string book. Today you can do everything with files, but I literally have my Hillcrest Hurricane and my Daily Texan string books with everything that I've written. You just save everything, because it's going to go on and it's going to help you get the next job. I mean, literally, my high school string book at Hillcrest Hurricane, when I went to the University of Texas, I showed that to the editors at the newspaper in college, and they immediately hired me. And I was writing my first story in August of 1974. Before I even started classes, I was already weeks into working on the Daily Texan, and my first assignment was covering the University of Texas football scrimmage. And I still have that headline. And if you saw it in the article, it's actually in the book. I got permission from the University of Texas to reprint it. And if you look in there, I mean, you can't really see it here, but
what page you on? What page are you on? What page is that?
On page 10, it says Campbell shines in workouts, and
right
and
there.
that's Earl Campbell. The All-American running back. I covered his first scrimmage. We were freshmen the same year at the University of Texas. So, I do go back and look at that stuff. But, I mean, I do cringe when I see my picture in some of the columns that I wrote, So.
What was it? What was the hair situation like? Did you have a fro?
Oh, I did. I actually I don't think I put that picture in the book, but I do have a picture of me with a fro. Well, there is a picture of me with long hair. That was when I was working for ABC as a runner at the University of Texas, and that's on page 16. You can see that. But, even in high school, I'd go to the Texas Ranger games and be on the field and, have fun doing that. So, So.
Did you start, so were you covering kind of sports kind of right from day one, or did you dip into politics and culture and other things?
Sports. Yeah, that was what I knew what I wanted to do when I was in 4th grade. And so what I did was I made sure I was getting a hard journalism and a hard English background. And I was already in elementary school. I was taking the bus from North Dallas area down to Channel 8 studio in downtown Dallas, the ABC affiliate. And I would go visit sportscaster Vern Lundquist when he was a local announcer for Channel 8 in Dallas. And I would go and watch him write the news, the sports report. And I would sit in the studio and watch him do it. And then I started inviting reporters from Channel 8 to come to our school and talk to our class. And then I was able to convince the principal of our elementary school and junior high to allow me to take personal field trips during the school day to go down to Channel 8 and go out with the reporters on stories and then come back with them and watch them edit it. And then I would like, that's so cool. And then I would see it on the news that night. And I remember doing one story where we were showing like an area where a bunch of like sanitation, was underground, and there was like steam coming up. And so Channel 8 did a story about what that mysterious steam was coming from underground, because people wanted to know. No one knew that there was something combusting under there. And I had mentioned to Cecile Burant, the reporter, and this is when I was like 12 or 13 or something. And I said, you know what? That kind of reminds me, seeming like there's going to be a dinosaur emerging from inner Earth, And she used that line on the air. She did not credit me. That's okay. But I know as a producer and director now, working with talent and stuff, it's like, you don't need to credit, it's satisfying when you supply a line on their IFB, their headset, about something, they use it on the air, so that's one of my jobs, as a producer, keeping the big picture and stuff. So, so I started way back then knowing kind of what I wanted to do. And my advice to people trying to be aspiring journalists or be in this industry or really any industry is try to get as much experience as you can before you get out of college. And, I speak to the University of North Texas and TCU students and Texas Austin students. And that's one of the things when people come up to me and they go, okay, I'm about to graduate. Now, what's your advice? When I said, well, what have you been doing for the last 3 years while you're here? Well, a lot of them will be getting, doing internships and trying to, write or whatever, or work at a radio station or news, or a TV station. I did all those things when I was at school because I wanted as much experience as I could. So I say that to anybody listening to this podcast. And it doesn't matter, if you go in the newsroom and you can't get a reporting job, which is going to be hard to do with no experience, just get your foot in the door, just get in there. If there's a job opening in the production and you don't really know much about production, well, learn about it, because you know what? It's going to help you when you eventually come on and be a reporter someday, if you fully understand what the camera guy's doing or what the editor is going to do, or lighting, or setting up a shot, composition. It's like the more you know of your craft and the people you're working with's craft, the better you'll succeed and the more respect you'll have from the people you work with.
Yeah, I'm blown away by how precocious you were as a kid. And I think that's evident. And I love hearing stories like that and seeing that. And I've had the privilege of seeing that in my own life. Not me being the one on the precocious side, but me being the higher up, looking to work with younger kids. Like this past week, I've been a producer on a feature documentary in New York City, and I helped put together kind of the New York crew. And we had some downtime, and a couple of the guys on the crew were discussing, sort of all these projects that they have, all these side projects that they're working on. And one guy's 27, the other guy's 24. And I just looked at them and I shook my head and I'm like, man, you guys are on the right path. And I'm like, I was nowhere near what you guys are doing, or, where you're looking when I was that age, when I was 27. So I think just giving giving that piece of advice where it's like, go for the experience, go work where you can, and be proactive too. I mean, I'm imagining being, your teacher, in the 8th grade, and the principal, having this young man come to them and say, hey, I want to reach out to these local reporters. I want to take a field trip to this, to this site. I think that goes a long way. And I wish it was more common for, kids and people in general to be like that. But I think I don't know if it's always been this thing, but it seems like a lot of people just kind of like wait for stuff to happen, for stuff to happen to them as opposed to going after it.
Yeah. I mean, I did the same thing in college at University of Texas. I was, I wrote a story about why college baseball is not televised back then. There was basketball and baseball, and football, and I contacted all the networks. And back then it was just ABC, CBS, and NBC doing sports. And they all asked for copies of my story because no one had ever done a story about that. And they were kind of intrigued, and the ABC people really liked what I wrote. And we stayed in contact. I ended up, going to Waco, which is about 90 minute drive from Austin. And I worked as a gopher doing graphics and running, on the University of Houston against Baylor regional football game. And I got to meet some great people. And then they started flying me around the country. And I ended up working on the national ABC game. They would call my fraternity house phone because we had no cell phones. And, they would call, they go, hey, Kirk Gowdy Jr. is on the phone. He wants to talk to you about going to Pittsburgh to do a football game this weekend, so that was cool. And so I was working almost every weekend doing a ABC football game, whether it was national or regional, while I was still in college. So this goes back to what you were saying, you kind of make your own way. I contacted the dean in the journalism department at Texas. And I said, hey, you know what? I am working these gigs. I go, I really think we should count this, or can we count this as an internship to where I could get credit for doing this? Well, yeah, I wanted to do it. It was great credit. I ended up getting 3 hours of credit for one semester for doing that. And that doesn't show up like in courses available, when you're signing up for add and drop or whatever. It's like I made my own class. And so, yeah, you need to be proactive and go after what you want. It's not necessarily going to come to you, because in this business, as you know, it's so competitive. Especially for me, like when I work as executive producer of the Dallas Wings WNBA, I feel so fortunate because there was only 12 teams. Soon there'll be 16, but right now there's only 12 jobs, producing WNBA and, like 30 in the NBA. So, I'm still working for the NBA, overseeing national telecasts in Dallas, Oklahoma City, and San Antonio as the court administrator. So I'm still involved with the NBA, but it's like you need to go after it.
Mm-hmm. With did you ever find out why college baseball wasn't being broadcast?
Yeah, it's pretty much the games lasted a long time,
Right.
and you need a lot of sponsors for it. There was no one had done it really, so you really need the ratings, and honestly, you don't really see college baseball even to this day on the major on ABC, CBS, or NBC. You do on ESPN. This is funny. It's kind of ironic. I did a story about like why college baseball is not televised, and then about 10 years later, I'm working for ESPN and I'm producing the College World Series for ESPN in Omaha, and I've done numerous College World Series for them. And I was also producing the college baseball game of the week for ESPN, the Sunday night game before they even had Major League Baseball. So, I was intrigued with it. And, and then I end up actually producing national college baseball games, which actually took me a few years before I even realized that. It's like I didn't even go back and to think of it until like when I was writing the book,
with college games not being televised, I wonder if it's if it has to do with the fact that with baseball there's minor league baseball as opposed to there's no minor league basketball. It's kind of like college and then NBA and similar with football.
Well, there's G League, for NBA, so that's being televised now. But again,
okay.
These are on ESPN, ESPN2, or CBS Sports Network, or but it's not on the major networks, really, to this day.
Yeah. So when you were, so it seems like you've been covering sports right from the get-go. Did you play as well?
In high school, yeah, I played. Well, I still play basketball, and I played baseball in junior and high school. I played on the baseball team. In fact, there's a story in my book, by the way, holding it up again. No,
we're going to be plugging that all time.
Well, I'm going to, but I'm really happy and surprised because the book doesn't actually release until October 22nd. You can pre-order it now. And last night I just did a little Google search for some like keywords like sports journalism, and because that's kind of in the title, sports television. And I Googled it, and it came up. Amazon actually has the book already under new and soon to be released books. It's ranked number 3 in the nation in sales, and we haven't even been published yet. It's available though. You can buy it worldwide, which also blows me away. So
nice. So you were playing at the time, and did as far as like skill level goes and stuff like that, how do you rank yourself as opposed to the guys you were writing about?
Oh no, I mean I was pretty good playing baseball even back when I was living in New Jersey till we were 9. Then we moved to Dallas, so I actually grew up in Rutherford, New Jersey. Well, till I was 9. So I was an ardent Yankee fan.
I do Rutherford, New Jersey has an arts center called the Williams Center, where for the past year or so I've been putting on comedy shows.
Okay. So this is really cool to me because I really want to go back to Rutherford and do something with my book because and the elementary school that I went to was Washington School. I used to live on Union Avenue, 155 Union Avenue, which is right near where Fairleigh Dickinson University used to be, but I could walk to downtown. And this will intrigue you too. It maybe not so the people listening, but my dad was an actor and he was in the Rutherford Players, which was a group of actors that put on plays basically for children, big plays, like, and so my dad was always like Rumpelstiltskin, or he would be the main character in the play, and everyone would go in the town, and then that might be my dad as the star in the show. But yeah, I mean, he had a sweatshirt that said Rutherford Players, and I would go backstage some. So I thought that was really cool. I was wondering whether their Rutherford Players still existed or not, but that's cool.
If you're out there, Rutherford Players, and you're a fan of the Lou Perez podcast, let us know. No, it's so funny. A nice connection. Rutherford's like a really quaint town. Like you go there and you feel like you've kind of been gone back in history a little bit.
So that's why I loved it. When I moved to Dallas, it was big and wide. But what I loved so much, and you talk about baseball, is I played in the baseball leagues, and every year in the spring, in the summer, we would have a little league opening day, and so everyone would meet in downtown Rutherford, and they'd have the fire engines and all the team. We'd all be in our uniforms, and we'd all like marching bands. We would march from downtown Rutherford down Union Avenue down to the Passaic River where the Little League fields were, and that's such a great memory. I love that, and I actually played baseball every day at Washington School there in Rutherford. And then when I got to Dallas, interestingly enough, as a Yankee fan, I ended up going to junior high and high school with David Mantle, Mickey Mantle's son, and we ended up playing together on the baseball team. So there's a chapter in my book about Tobolowsky, Donosky, Steinfeld, and Mantle, and it really was Mantle in the batting order. And he looked just like his dad, except for he has red hair. And I saw him a few years ago at our high school reunion. So yeah.
Did he ever play? Did he go pro? I mean,
No.
you talk about pressure, or living up to a legacy, like living, if you want to play baseball and your dad's Mickey Mantle. I mean, talk about the shadow there is just insane.
Yeah. And so I wrote a little bit about this, but one thing I didn't, it's like he had his dad's natural swing, but he wasn't a great fielder and everything. And part of that was, and his dad was a shortstop coming up, but we asked him and he said, well, his dad wasn't around a lot to play catch with him. So he didn't get a lot of that, which is, difficult, but, and we also, his mom would come watch us play a lot, Merlin, but we always asked him if his dad was coming to see us play. And he said, no, my dad doesn't really watch the limelight and do and be out in the public. And so we're all disappointed. But then a few years ago, right before Mickey Mantle passed away, he did a special with Bob Costas about his life. And Bob interviewed him. And Mickey said that one of the things he regretted was not being there for the kids and being out there in public when they played games. But he did come and watch, he said, his kids play sometimes, but he would stay in his car in the parking lot so that, people wouldn't come up to him and, bother him. And he wished that he had come out there and got to know the other parents more and be a little more personable, and that he regretted that. So the point there is that I guess Mickey Mantle Mick actually did see us play. So, wow. Which was just kind of cool. So,
yeah, that touches on a lot of things, like, the reality of stardom, and then the regret of that stardom, or how do you handle that? Especially, I guess that, at that time when you're, Mickey Mantle is Mickey Mantle. Mickey Mantle is like, he's Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali, one of the greats. I recently took my oldest son, who's 4, to his first baseball game because we've started him on T-ball, and there's a local minor league team, and it was the first game I'd ever been to of minor leagues. And what's great about like a minor league team is that you can get incredible seats that, there's no way I could get behind the plate at a Yankees or Mets game. It's just, that's just not going to happen. And I had never been, kind of like a fan of baseball. I think I was, kind of like, one of the people like, oh, it's long and it's boring and blah, blah, blah. And then the first game that I bring my son to, we watched, I think it was like 2 home runs, 3 stolen bases. It was just an incredible game. And being there live for the sound of the ball, the crack off of the bat, which just felt, I don't know, it's sort of like reinvigorating. And I'm like, oh, wow, now I get, what the rush is of baseball. And then about, I think it was the 4th inning, my son turns to me, he's like, can we go? And it was, the home team was rallying and just not, just hitting dingers after dinger. And I was like, okay, I guess we have to go. So my son, I blame my son for cutting short what was possibly the most exciting game that I had ever watched, the minor league game.
Yeah, because like in the minor leagues too, there's usually 1 or 2 players that are major league quality, and
Right.
and others aren't, and they'll tend to stand out, and they'll have great games and great. So you'll see like one guy hit 2 home runs to steal 3 bases, and one guy strike out 5, and the other guy's walking everybody. So yeah, and then there's a lot of great atmosphere at the minor league games. So yeah.
I wanted to ask you about this. I remember watching something about a documentary about Howard Cosell, and there was in the doc they talk about like this tension between like Howard Cosell and when they started to bring professional athletes to come and do commentary. So it was like there was no it was sort of getting away from the specialized sportscaster broadcaster to bringing on these former athletes. Do you have know anything about like that time and what that tension was about?
Yeah, I actually worked on Monday Night Football, and I got to work with Howard Cosell a little bit. And really, Howard was an outsider when he came in. I mean, why should they have had Howard Cosell on Monday Night Football? I mean, Keith Jackson was the play-by-play the first year, and then they brought Frank Gifford, I believe, as the play-by-play. But why? And Danny Don Meredith was there as an athlete. So why Howard Cosell? He wasn't an athlete. He wasn't football savvy. He was an opinionated guy that Roone Arledge and the other executives at ABC thought would be perfect for a primetime game. An opinionated person, sometimes moved the needle both ways. You either liked him or you hated him, but it was like one of those things where, compelling for television. But I know, like, when I believe later on when they would try to bring in some other people like actors or whatever, I know he wouldn't like that, but I know he did like when they would have like some special guests come in. I think when they had, I believe John Lennon was in the booth.
Oh, really?
One night. Yeah. So, or others like that, celebrities. And, yeah. So, but I remember when I would do on a few of the telecasts, I would do the halftime highlights to where I would get the notes from NFL Films on what we were going to show. And then I would jot them down to Howard. And then about 3:00 in the afternoon, he would do the voiceover for the halftime highlights from Monday Night Football. And he would just do it perfectly, like every time I did it, and it was all without a script. He would just take the notes, there he goes all the way, like Chris Berman is actually, copying Howard Cosell because that was so like unbelievable and, stylish. And so that's kind of an ode to Howard Cosell as it was. And and then I also remember that Howard would do a nightly national little like 3-minute sportscast, like 5:25 on the ABC radio network, whatever network it was. This is Howard Cosell. That's how he'd always start, and he just did it like off the top of his head, and he had his like a technician with him with a reel-to-reel recording it, and then he'd feed it down the line. And I said to him, that was remarkable. I mean, he did this without a script. And he says, that's the way he always does it. And he goes, in the 20 years that I've worked with him, I've never seen him not do it in one take. He's done it in one take every time. That's talent.
Yeah, it makes me feel awful just as in my acting career, just not remembering lines and having to do multiple takes. I'm no Howard Cosell for sure. So you've won. You're a 10-time Emmy award-winning TV sports producer.
Right.
10 times. Like, when you win that much, I'm just wondering, like, who beat you in the times that you didn't win? I mean, to get 10 of those things.
Well,
who's your rival? Who's like, the Red Sox, Yankees, who's your foe?
Oh yeah. It's usually like ESPN or NBC or ABC or, locally or regionally, it could be just another show on the network that I work with. It could be like NBA basketball. It could be San Antonio Spurs or the Mavericks. Could be the Texas Ranger game, so you never know. I know I can tell you I was nominated for a Cable Ace Award that was before the cable networks were included in the national Emmys. And this was for I was the only regional national show that was nominated, going up against, it was for the Major Indoor Soccer League Championship game, which is still to this day one of the best shows we've ever done. Dramatic storylines, great camera work, great audio. I mean, it was like won in overtime. The team came back, our home team came back and won in the end, and on the road, which made it even better because the crowd was stunned there. Well, we got nominated, and I'm going up against like ESPN college basketball, HBO Sugar Ray Leonard, Hagler boxing, the Winter National Ski Championships on ESPN, NASCAR racing, national networks. And then the boxing, I believe, actually won, but that's still cool because I was flown out to Hollywood and I was able to go to a nominees party at Spago's restaurant, and I walked in on the red carpet and Entertainment Tonight's interviewing people, and comedian Elaine Boozler back then was hosting the show, and she took me under.
You definitely dated yourself.
No,
with the Elaine Boozler reference.
Yeah, but she's still touring now. I actually saw her a few years ago. My wife went to see her in Dallas, and we got a picture. Had it before, and then another one now. But the thing was that she took me kind of under her arm as the kid from Texas and introduced me to all the celebrities. Because for one night, I was actually, nominated with all of them, like Shelley Duvall, who just passed away, Rod Steiger, Mark Hamill, Max Headroom. Yeah, that dates you, but there were a lot of those people at that party. And then once we got, a month later where they had the awards show at the Wiltern Theater in LA, they flew me out there and it was televised on all of the cable networks, had it live. And, when they did the nominees, they had the camera on me and my wife, and stuff. So that was kind of cool for that one time, but we ended up losing, like I said, to boxing. That was still a great experience.
So an award like that, so it's coming down to basically that one event, right? And it's like, in a way, it's kind of like, that's not fair, because if you're watching a Sugar Ray Leonard, boxing match, it's especially around that time in the 80s. I mean, you're in for an incredible fight, no doubt. Basically all they had to do was just put the camera on the guy, and whoever who did he fight? Do you remember who he? I
think it was Hagler.
Oh my God! Yeah, come on. That beating that is a tough one. So with that, covering sports, especially like broadcasting sports, it's not as easy as just putting a camera on this thing. Like how do you help to craft a story, or to if something really momentous is happening, how do you get that point across to a viewing public, like letting them know, like, no, what's going on here is incredible, and do not turn the channel.
Yeah, well, I can use an example that just happened a few weeks ago. We were televising the Dallas Wings game against the New York Liberty, who's playing tonight in the semifinals against Las Vegas Aces on ESPN, I believe. And anyway, so all she needed was, I think, like 10 points to become the all-time leading scorer in Dallas Wings franchise history. And the game was being televised not only on Bally Sports Southwest, but we were national on Prime, Amazon Prime. So I wanted to get that across, and I wanted to make sure that the viewers kind of knew what was about to happen, and that you want to make it somewhat dramatic, right? So what we do is, I had our graphics person design an Enrique Ogunbowale like action photo, like in the bottom left of the frame, and then underneath it would say 10 points to franchise record, and then 7 points to franchise record, and it would be in the lower third. So you would like almost like, you couldn't wait for it to happen. And then when it happened, it changed to franchise leading scorer, a new thing, and the announcer went crazy. So that's, thought about ahead of time. And it's not like you can just do it right then, but you always want to know what the story and main storylines are of the game. We have a production meeting, a Zoom meeting, the day before our telecast with the announcers, our AP, and our director, and sometimes our GM from our team, and we'll go over the storylines for both teams, so we know what we're going to do, and we want to make sure that we communicate that to the viewers. You're more interested in watching the show and continue to watching the show. It's more compelling if you know more about the athletes and the stories, because anyone can just put camera one and the score bug up on the air, and that's going to show the game. And you're not going to get a lot of people calling and complaining saying, I can't see the game. They're not going to call. As long as you can see the game and know what the score is, most people are pretty happy with that. But I'm not. It's like most people are, where's the replays, Marge? We can't watch the show. But we want to do more than that. We don't want to just televise a game. We don't just want to. What we try to do is televise a show that has elements in it, flashbacks, more stories about the players, animated graphics, without missing any action during the show. But you want it to be entertaining. We're in the television business, so especially challenging when the team like the Dallas Wings this year, didn't do as well as expected. So you're trying to come up with compelling stories to keep people watching.
Yeah. When did you get started with WNBA stuff?
Yeah, well, I started in the inaugural year with the WNBA because I was working for ESPN and freelancing as a contractor on events. And then I was already doing NBA basketball. I did, the San Antonio Spurs for 23 years. And so when it came about, for the WNBA to start on ESPN and Lifetime Network, ESPN hired me to produce the games on Lifetime Network with Michelle Tafoya and Reggie Miller and Summer Sanders and Megan Pattison. And then on ESPN with Robin Roberts, who's now on Good Morning America, and the current still head coach of Connecticut, Gino Auriemma. So that was great. So I've been involved with the WNBA since its inaugural year. And also the league asked me to produce the first two ever Commissioner Cup championship games, which pretty historic. And that was great being involved with that. So, and then with the Dallas Wings, I've been doing executive producer of those, producing those games for this last 9 years already. It's gone by pretty fast.
Right. Yeah. I've the WNBA has, has, for me, it's existed, but I haven't but I never really heard much about it. The only times I would hear stuff about it would be kind of when it came to discussions about, I guess, player pay. Like then it would kind of jump into jump into my feed, and I'd be reading about it. But it seems like this past year, especially with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, it's like those two players have just blown up the league to proportions that are pretty amazing.
That's true, and I've done 4 Caitlin Clark games this year. I was involved in her first ever professional game. I was there for her game when she set the WNBA record for 19 assists in one game, and I was producing the game on September 15th, a few weeks ago in Indianapolis, when she scored her career high. I believe it was 35 points in that game. And so I am a fan of hers since college, but, and then doing her games is great. She's like underestimated with her passing ability. I think she's probably, as I've heard a couple of analysts say, the best passing guard in the league, maybe the best passer in the league. And you think of her mostly as scoring, but she's just incredible. She throws the ball. She can throw the ball where you are as a teammate, but a lot of times she has the ability to know, like Magic Johnson could, or John Stockton, or Nancy Lieberman, or Courtney Vandersloot, or some of these others, Sue Bird, can throw the ball to where you're going to be, not necessarily where you are right now. And so she can get it to you in stride, including really like end-to-end passes she's real good at. So I'm a big fan of hers. I think she carries herself really well off the court and on the court. And I think a lot of what you said with Angel Reese and Caitlin is you started in college. And so when people were enamored with the NCAAs and the March Madness for the women, I mean, the women's ratings were higher than the men's. And, it's like they wanted to see them play. So when they came in the league, it carried over into the WNBA. But then what it did was it exposed all of the new viewers to how great the league was already, and how Asia Wilson from the Las Vegas Aces has possibly the best footwork of anyone that I've seen for a tall, 4 or 5 player, one of the most talented players, in the history of the league. She's been in the league for a few years, MVP again. And, so, people are starting to see her, and, Nafisa Collier from the Minnesota Lynx, and, Arike Ogunbowale from the Dallas Wings. These players can play. And, now we have more eyeballs that can see it.
It's recently we're talking now, and there's like a big thing going around about sort of the quote unquote like racist fans coming into the league. And when I hear that with racist fans, I can't imagine that racists have started watching the WNBA as opposed to racists have just found the WNBA and are kind of trolling what's going on. I don't know if it kind of reminds me a little bit of, I guess, like in the 1980s, where sort of the Celtics Lakers rivalry, that for some people made it a race thing of like, kind of here's the white Boston team, even though there were black players on it, against, the black flashy Los Angeles team. But meanwhile, for the players themselves, it wasn't a race thing at all, but it was sort of the surrounding, I don't know.
It's a fun rivalry thing. Fans are and they support their teams, and we're seeing them back their players. I'm not going to get into anything like that, personally. Yeah. Really, anything to do with that. I just want to talk about how great the league is and how fantastic it is, and I'm very happy that people are talking positively about the WNBA right now.
And I like too the relationship between Clark and Reese. Whatever the rivalry was in college, and the rivalry obviously came over into the professional. But they seem to really respect each other as players. So
I think they really,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think they really understand the dynamic of the relationship dating back from college and their rivalry.
Yeah, the hand thing and all that.
Yeah, and they understand how that attracts viewers to the league.
Sure.
But like for sure, like Caitlin Clark is someone that is very mature and she handles herself very well, even when she's been knocked to the floor. Just get up and do your job. So, and Angel Reese is a very hard worker on the floor. One of the greatest rebounders already as a rookie that we've ever seen. So, but there are a lot of other great players too. I mean, too bad Cameron Brink from the Los Angeles Sparks was injured earlier. She was making a really big impact right away until she was lost for the season. And there are a lot more great players coming up, like in the next draft, Paige Beckers and a few others.
Yeah. I sometimes I find myself enjoying like documentaries about sports, sometimes more than the actual sports themselves. And like, for example, there was I don't know if it was 30 for 30. It was basically the story of Magic Johnson and Larry Bird in the 80s, which I watched and I absolutely loved the documentary they put together. In particular, the relationship between Johnson and Larry Bird, and when Larry Bird had to deal with the fact that his mother's favorite basketball player was Magic Johnson, and talk about what that does to an ultra competitive guy. But I imagine, but it's wild, like with Clark and Reese. I mean, the turnaround from them playing in college to them playing in the pros, was it, like a couple? It felt like it was a couple of days, maybe it was a couple of months.
It's like they finished in like April, May is when the games were starting. I think like May 3rd, I believe, was Caitlin's first game that I was set to produce. But I mean, let me just give you some numbers.
Yeah.
WNBA attendance up 48% over last season. 154 sellouts this year compared to 45 in 2023. Over 54 million viewers across the various network platforms. Social media drew 2 billion video hits, which quadrupled the number from last year. 22 regular season games average at least 1 million viewers. And, the WNBA averaged 9,807 fans this year compared to 6,615 last season. So that's a 50% increase about. And so, they had a lot of impact and effect on the league. And I think, it helped in the WNBA and the NBA's new media rights, reportedly 2.2 billion media rights deals for 11 seasons. So, had a really big effect.
And also, I mean, it's showing, if you want, it should go without saying, if you want, players to be paid better, you got to be a fan. You gotta support. You gotta, get those tickets.
Yeah, and when COVID hit, that was difficult for the league, with no money coming in for the teams, and so I mean, kudos to the NBA and the WNBA for stepping up and keeping the league going. When it was costing a lot of money, and then sending the teams down to the bubble. There was really, I can't specifically say because I don't know, but I mean, you have to respect what the league did and making sure that the league kept going, and now it's paying off. I mean, we have a lot of great new players, and we have a lot more on the way. But the biggest thing is that there are already a lot of great players in the league, and so now people are seeing it, and they're going to the games, and they're watching the games, and so that makes it fun for us. I don't care really if there's just 1 or 2 people watching my games. I'm going to do the same job producing the games for whether there's 2 million people or 100 people watching our game. I still want to pursue and make our product look the best it possibly can on the air.
Yeah, and over your decades of work in the field, what are some of your favorite moments or, iconic moments that come to mind?
Well, I told you about the major indoor soccer league, the Dallas Tornado versus the Tacoma Stars. That seems like, why would I say that? It just was such a fun event to do. And like I said, we got nominated for a National Cable Ace Award for it. So I look fondly back on that. In fact, I'm going on a national book tour starting October 20th. And when I'm in Dallas on the October 30th Book Fest event at the JCC in Dallas, I've invited the head coach, the goalkeeper, and the star player from the Sidekicks from '87. And, the head coach now is 90 years old, and they're going to surprise when we show a clip from that. I'm going to introduce them to all of the audience that's there. It'll be kind of cool for everyone. But, working 3 Olympics for NBC was really cool, and was a goal of mine. And working with Bob Costas in 1992, producing the official Olympic highlight video for NBC and Blockbuster, and also the official Dream Team 1 video.
Wow.
Barcelona. I did that for Blockbuster and NBC Sports. So I was in Barcelona doing those, and then finishing them up. There's, some good stories there in my book about that, and working with Bob Costas. And then, in '96, to this day, I still can't believe that NBC asked me, instead of a staff person, to produce beach volleyball. And that was the first year it was coming in. And I go, wow, that's going to be cool. So yeah, I worked that. And Bill Walton, Naismith Hall of Famer, who passed away last May, was my sideline reporter. So, because he had played volleyball, and I had also worked with him in the NBA, and also worked with him on one of my Emmy Award-winning series called Icons of Coaching, where we did a feature about John Wooden, his coach from UCLA, and we went to Bill's house in San Diego and recorded it. It was really cool seeing all the Grateful Dead stuff inside. There's a picture in the book when we went there. But working the Olympics, and then they asked me to stay in Atlanta to produce some volleyball, but also to produce Team USA Women's Softball Championship, the gold medal game. So there's a story in there about how I tried to convince the league, NBC, to televise the women's softball game in prime time. So it's a pretty interesting story with Dick Ebersol.
With you're describing Bill Walton, and I think for me, maybe it's just for me, but something happens where you have these incredible Hall of Famer athletes who they do this incredible, amazing work. They retire, and then people start just knowing them kind of from like broadcasting, like that, for right. The amount of, for example, I wasn't old enough to watch Walton play at UCLA, but yeah. I recognize the voice and I recognize him. So it's sort of like this thing happens where you forget how much of a badass so many of these players were. And I find that with, I'm a fan of mixed martial arts, and I find that in mixed martial arts where, like, say, for example, there's a retired fighter, Daniel Cormier, who held he was a heavyweight champion and a light heavyweight champion. He's kind of like looks like a pudgy guy. The guy is a monster. I mean, when it comes to fighting, but he's so likable and kind of cute and cuddly in his broadcasting that you can forget. And I it's like, I guess all that is, is kind of to say, I wonder what it's like for, players to, make that transition where it's like, they're no longer that, kind of formidable player. They're now, something else.
Yeah. Well, I think some players can handle it and some don't. I think the ones that are most prepared, that are doing other things, getting themselves ready for the next step in their life, already have a next step in their life, and that they're not only defined by being a former athlete, So Bill Walton was so talented. He could have, I believe he went to law school at one point, or why it could have been. And then, he was so into the Grateful Dead and music and traveling around and doing that, had podcasts about the Grateful Dead and music. And, had this great documentary that aired on ESPN last year called the Luckiest Guy in the World. If you haven't seen that documentary, it's a series of like 3 of them. You definitely need to see it because it's just fantastic. Well, I asked him, and he ended up writing the introduction for my book. So right on the top of the book, introduction.
That's
by
amazing.
Book. And when you read it, he sent it to me June of 2023. He passed away in May of 24. But when he sent it to me, I read it and I go, this is so quintessential Bill Walton. When you read it, you can just picture and hear him saying it. There's no doubt when you read it that he wrote it, so it was great, getting to know him and working with him numerous times.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who are interested, and you should be interested, Robert Steinfeld, 321, we're on the air, an inside look at sports television journalism and gender equity. Introduction by Bill Walton. And thank you so much, Robert. I hope a lot of people read your book. It's coming out later this month in October, and you're going to be on the road. Do you have a website where people can keep up on all your stuff?
Sure. Number one, it's just my name, Robert Steinfeld. I think you can see it. It's robertsteinfeld.com. And if you go there, it'll have more information about me. It'll have more information about the book. You can actually order the book from there. You can order it on every major book site, minor book site in the world, in Germany, Australia, on Amazon, on Google, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, And I was real excited because this morning I just, did the search on the word sports journalism, and it's ranked number 3 in the nation in new and upcoming sports journalism books. So number 3 right now with a bullet.
Boom.